There's a lot of rumours flying around at the moment, in general, but I want to focus on rumours surrounding the Canon EOS M system. Specifically, there's two. One says that Canon are about to release an M7, speculated M7, which looks like it's going to be a pretty flagship camera for that series. And then there's another rumour that says Canon are going to scrap the M system altogether next year. Now, for me, there's always been a big question mark over the M series ever since Canon released the RF lineup. Because I've highlighted this in several videos before. In the DSLR era, everything was EF mount. Yes, their EFS lenses couldn't mount onto full frame camera bodies, but you could use the full frame lenses on their aps-c bodies. So what a lot of people would do, I say a lot of people, what I suspect a lot of people would do, is the same as what I did. When I first started looking at cameras, I saw like the price of the 5D Mark II and the L grade lenses at the time, and I thought, where's the justification in that much money? Because people who are just starting out in photography have no comprehension as to the potential benefits of higher end lenses or higher end cameras. They just see the price tags and think, that's way too expensive for me. I want to start off with something cheaper. So I opted for the 550D. I decided, based off what I'd read, that between Canon and Nikon, Canon was the better option for me, and the 550D looked like the best of their options for what I needed. And then I started to gradually buy other lenses for it, but pretty much all the lenses that I ever bought, by fluke or whatever, turned out to be EF lenses, not EFS lenses. Then fast forward a few years, and I decided to move on to full frame by buying the 5D Mark II, but I already had a selection of full frame lenses, so I just had to change the camera body, and the lenses, okay, I ended up upgrading the lenses, but it was done slowly over a period of time. And that kind of kept me tied into Canon as well, because I didn't want to have to sell absolutely everything to then have to switch all in one go. In fact, a couple of times when I had the 5D Mark III, I considered switching to Nikon. When they brought out the likes of the D850, for example, I considered switching then, but I couldn't take my lenses with me. It would mean having to change absolutely everything, and that was like kind of the big factor that put me off. So I think people already having invested in your stuff is a big contributor to brand loyalty. But that's potentially going to be a problem in the future with their current setup of mirrorless cameras. Because the EF-M lenses and the RF lenses are totally incompatible with each other. As in, you can't put the EF-M on the RF cameras and you can't put RF lenses on the EF-M. So it's not even like you could, buy an EF-M camera body, start buying RF lenses and adapt them onto your EF-M so that if you ever then decide to go full frame, you just change the camera body. It's not going to work. Would you like to see them a bit better? Go back to sleep. There you go. Anyone who's starting out in photography now, if they decide they want a mirrorless and they want a Canon, they're probably not going to kind of jump straight into a very expensive RF system. They're probably going to start off with an EF-M. So they buy into an EF-M, they buy the EF-M lenses. If in the future they then decide that they want to move on to a full frame system, they have to then sell everything of their EF-M to buy into the RF. But then that opens up a big potential for them to say, I'm selling everything aps-c anyway, and then I'm going to have to buy everything new full frame. So do I still want to stick with Canon, or do I want to go to a different manufacturer? I'm not saying that everyone's going to immediately jump ship, but it opens you up to that potential that a lot more people are going to move to a different system because there's less to keep them tied into you. Now, I know there's the argument of adapting your EF lenses. So, you could buy into the M series now if you're just starting out, but you could buy EF lenses rather than EF-M lenses and use the Canon adapter to make them fit your M series. And then if you then decide to switch to RF, you can just sell the body, buy the RF adapter, and keep using your EF lenses. And that is a semi-valid argument, but there's a couple of problems with it. Firstly, you still then have the potential argument of, I could move to a different manufacturer. I've got EF lenses, I'm going to have to adapt them onto a mirrorless body of some kind. Do I want to stick with a Canon mirrorless system, or do I want to go to, say, a Sony one and get something like the Sigma MC11 instead? Again, I'm not saying everyone would do that, but there would still be the potential that some people would, that they wouldn't do that if their lenses were just natively compatible with the RF system to begin with. Secondly is arguably the availability of EF lenses, because Canon have pretty much all but said they are not making any more EF lenses. I think what they actually said is they're not making any more lenses unless there's kind of demand for a specific lens, but they're basically focusing all their attention now to the mirrorless systems rather than the DSLRs. Now, yes, they still currently make DSLR lenses, but if they're focusing so much attention to the mirrorless lenses, as they make more and more mirrorless lenses, they're going to have to start focusing their production to those lenses rather than continue to make the old DSLR lenses. So there's going to be no new designs of DSLR lenses, so all of the ones that exist are going to start to age relative to what else is available out there. Secondly, they're not going to be produced anymore, so stock levels of new lenses are going to diminish to the point that you don't find them in shops. They're all going to be second-hand in the same way that you can't buy FD lenses brand new anymore. And then if they're not in shops, that's really the big area, I think, for people entering photography. When you're first starting out as a hobbyist, you don't know what you're looking for, and yeah, you could spend hours trawling through forums and people will say, get an M series camera and then go and find some good second-hand EF lenses and use an adapter, and then that'll future-proof you. But a lot of people wouldn't do that. A lot of people will go, I will go to a shop with people who deal with cameras on a daily basis, and I will go and ask them. And I don't think it's going to be that long, relatively speaking, before like main street camera shops, or even just any sort of technology shops that have a little camera section, aren't bothering stocking DSLRs. They're all stocking mirrorless instead, because, that's what everyone seems to be buying these days. So I think having these two camera systems completely unrelated to each other is, firstly, it's going to sow confusion into the next generation, if you like, of people starting out in photography. And secondly, it kind of removes all case of brand loyalty as well. Now, does that mean that Canon are going to scrap the M series altogether? This is a difficult one to call. The M was released 8 years ago now. 2012, the original M series came out. And then since then, they've had the M2, the M3, the M5, the M6, the M50, the M6 Mark II, and now potentially an M7. So 7 or 8 cameras in 8 years. So that's an average of around a camera a year. But in that same 8-year period, they've only released 8 lenses as well. So that's about 1 lens a year again, which that is not a sufficient number of lenses to sustain a system like that. By comparison, the RF system has only been on the market for 2 years, and in that 2-year period, we've had the R, the RP, the R5, and the R6, so 4 cameras in 2 years, and they've had 15 different lenses, so 7.5 times more lenses per year than the EFM. So on the one hand, you kind of think they're not interested in the M series at all if they're not bringing out any lenses for it. And the lenses in the lineup aren't particularly barnstorming either. I mean, they have 3 primes and 5 zooms. And of the 5 zooms, 3 of them are available as kit lenses. You've got the 18 to 55, the 18 to 150, and then the 15 to 45. And then the other 2 are the 55 to 200, and then the 11 to 22. But they're all max out at f5.6 or 6.3 on the long ends. So no fast zooms. None of them are 2.8. And none of them are particularly useful for sports and wildlife either. The 55 to 200 is not a particularly long lens, and it's not a particularly fast lens, which is odd because the M6 Mark II is advertised as being able to do up to 14 frames a second with autofocus. And I've seen people review it and say, it works really great for sports shooting, but whenever they test it out in a sports scenario, they've usually adapted it to like a big 70 to 200 2.8 full frame DSLR lens. And that whole notion goes completely against the philosophy of the M series to begin with. The M series was small, really compact, travel-friendly cameras that are just great for people that just want, basically a tiny travel camera. I mean, hell, my mum uses an M5 with an 18 to 150mm kit lens, and that is absolutely perfect for her because she can just, it doesn't take up any space in a bag. She can just carry it around with her on a daily basis and snap photos. And yes, I did recommend that camera to her after I switched to Sony. And no, I don't hate my mother, before you think that that's why I recommended a Canon for her. For what she needs, that camera is absolutely perfect for anyone who thinks that I just absolutely despise Canon and have nothing good to say about them. Not true. Those M series cameras, for people that want a small travel-friendly system, they work brilliantly. But they don't expand beyond that. They don't have the lens lineup to go with people that want to expand their horizons, and they don't have the body size to really suit people that want to then adapt the body onto those bigger lenses that are available in DSLR mount. So on the one hand, you kind of think they're not paying any attention to the M series, surely they're going to let it die off. But then you look at the rumours of this M7, and you're looking 32 megapixels, which is probably just the same sensor that's in the M6 Mark II anyway. Then you've got rumoured IBIS, twin SD card slots, 4K up to 60 frames a second, and a price tag of $1,600. So that's like flagship level sort of territory right there. So you think either they have no interest in the M series and they are just kind of taking the mick and seeing how expensive can they make stuff and people will still buy it, or they're trying to keep it ticking over. But if they're going to keep it ticking over with high-end bodies like that, they need some lenses to go with it. Because it seems like, if these rumours are true, that Canon are trying to make the M7 the mirrorless replacement to the 7D series. And I don't think that's going to fly with people. The 7D series was a massive commercial success for Canon. It brought the speed in terms of shooting and autofocus on the par with what you would see from a 1D, but with nowhere near the price tag. So it worked absolutely perfect for the enthusiastic sports and wildlife photographers that didn't want to spend several grand on a 1D camera body. But pretty much every time I've ever seen someone shooting with a 7D in those sorts of environments, they're usually coupled to something like either a 70 to 200 2.8 or like a 100 to 400 instead. They opt for the higher end full frame lenses. So I think it would be a great idea for Canon to bring out an aps-c RF camera body. Even if it was only higher end to begin with, and then maybe some more budget friendly options further down the line. Now, I know there'll be some people that say, but the RF lenses are expensive. And to be fair, yes, the L grade lenses, the higher end lenses, are pretty pricey at the moment, but then they were pretty pricey as DSLR lenses when they first came out. Canon do seem to be focusing on bringing out more budget friendly lenses as well, because they have like the RP. The RP is a $1,000 camera. People are not going to want to go, I'm going to spend $1,000 on a Canon RP, and then I'm going to sink like $4,000 into a 28 to 70 f2 lens. So they are rolling out more budget-friendly lenses as well. They've got the 24 to 105, the new kit lens, the non-L kit lens, the 35 1.8 macro. They've obviously got those new 6 and 800mm f11 lenses. All of those relatively very budget-friendly. That, and also the fact that the lenses are all pretty new at the moment. They haven't had time to kind of trickle down, start seeing replacements for them come in, start to see second-hand options available. And when that starts to happen, when the likes of the 70 to 200 2.8s or the 100 to 500s have started to come down in price, or they're available in second-hand, there will be a lot of people who, have been using, say, the 70 and the EF lenses are going to be waiting. If there's not an APS-C camera body, they're going to be clawing at the bit for one. And it's a prime opportunity, I think, to make a spiritual successor to the 7D DSLR series and bring it into the mirrorless. I think the ideal platform would be the R6 camera body. I think that would be ideal, if you like, for an APS-C setup. It's not a huge camera body. It's not massive, it's not as big as the R5, and it doesn't need to be. Obviously, APS-C sensor, I don't think they should bother with the 32.5 megapixel sensor from the M6 Mark II either. I think they should probably keep the resolution down, maybe around 24, but a brand new 24 megapixel sensor. That way it focuses more on speed and noise performance, and not just speed in terms of shooting speed, but also how quickly it can read the information off the sensor so it can try and remove any rolling shutter, which, if you're breaking a camera aimed at sports and wildlife shooters, and one of the advantages of mirrorless is silent shooting, you don't want banding and rolling shutter to be a potential problem. So 24 megapixel sensor for even faster read speeds off the sensor and better noise performance would be an ideal candidate. And then, in terms of shooting speeds, if the M6 Mark II is pumping out 14 frames a second and the 1DX Mark III is doing 20 frames a second mechanical, I could see an R7, as we'll call it, could easily do maybe 16 frames a second mechanical and in excess of 20 frames a second silent. And again, that would be, if they brought that out at, say, the $1,800 mark, that would be an absolute prime candidate for hooking up to a 70 to 200 RF lens or the 100 to 500mm lens, and would be a barnstorming hobbyist sports and wildlife setup, I reckon. But that's just my opinion. What do you reckon Canon should do? Do you think they should try and kind of segregate them a little bit more, push the two systems apart? Do you reckon they should try and bring them closer together? Do you reckon they should just leave everything exactly as it is? Or do you think they should just bin off the M series altogether? Let me know your thoughts and comments in the box down below. While you're down there, if you enjoyed this video, please consider hitting the like and subscribe button, and also consider checking out my Patreon account as well, where you can get some exclusive behind the scenes content and access to some prize competitions as well. As always, thank you so much for stopping by, and hopefully I will see you in the next video.